Hello everybody! So today we're going to do some Gumpaste Roses. So we're just specifically talking about roses and creating those petals, and I'll do different flower videos separately. But wanted to start out just kind of showing you what we've got started here so that we can kind of zoom in and you can show you that in the previous video we've already talked about the centers, how it just really, it's a teardrop shape that we're going to cover completely with our wraparound petal. And I showed you one where you can make it, and then also how you can buy pre-made acrylic stamens. Same thing though, you're still going to have to hide this with a wraparound petal. And then through the stages, we're going to be taking some gum paste and doing our wraparound petal so that it looks like a tiny little bud at the top. I've got two different examples here. And then we're going to continue on building petals in order to make full roses. And it's really your choice on how large and bountiful you want the rose to be. Here we've got a small tea rose right here in the center with the red gum paste. And then I have a slightly larger rose on this side that has the wraparound petal, two kind of hooked petals, a row of 3, a row of 5, and then a row of 7. We usually try to do odd numbers for our rows of flowers. Nothing in nature is perfect though, so it doesn't have to be exactly that way. You'll find your rhythm on how you be able to make your flowers. And then on the bottom, we talked about the center of every flower that you have a stamen, but then the calyx is the bottom of the actual flowers. So this is just one size of a calyx cutter. Kind of looks like a little starfish, but you can find lots of different types of stamens, or even just a kind of a different shape altogether that will give it that same look, because that's what the flower grows from. It grows from the ground. So the calyx is usually green, and then you can always accent with lots of colors afterwards.
Hold that one up backwards so I can see that.
That was producer Jerry.
Why do you call me producer Jerry instead of
Because it's your
husband?
It's my husband,
Jeremiah.
but that's his Instagram handle, and that's what everybody calls him. Producer Jerry. So I'm going to go ahead and set these down. Whenever you're making any of your gum paste flowers, you need things to dry before you can really assemble up the entire rose. So we have to do this in stages, just like you would have to do them when you begin to make yours. So what you see down here on my bench is that I have some gum paste that I've already rolled and I've cut out, and I'll bring that out and start to frill the edges with you. But you can also see I have some petals that I've already begin to wire and frill the edges, and these need to be fully dry before I can then attach them to my flower and make a bigger flower. So with this red one, for example, it's still soft on the outside, so this needs another day or two before this can completely dry. But once it is dry and these petals are dry, I can attach them and make this look like an even fuller rose. And we hide all the wires with floral tape, but these need time to dry first. So let's start out with the wraparound petal and then the inside petals. I'll show you some techniques for veining some petals if you choose to want to vein your flowers, and then also a calyx. So you're going to roll out your gum paste, roll it to about a 1/16 of an inch, and then using some compressed foam, whether it be a red square that you might have, maybe it's blue, in this case I have a yellow one that I use to make the filler flowers. We're going to go ahead and with our balling tool, I'm going to frill this out. And what I mean by frill, I want the edges to get as thin as I can get them, and the compressed foam will help so that it doesn't stick. And just like we used other different types of mediums, modeling chocolate, marzipan, kind of going half on the petal and half on the foam. I'll move this off to one side. And these are our wraparound petals. So I'm going to hide my stamen with this larger just circle petal and attach it with a little glue. So I have a little bit of glue here, and I have my stamen. So I'm going to put just a little bit of glue down here. And remember, when this face up is the pretty side, so I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to place this down, and it's going to adhere a little bit from my glue. And then all I'm really going to do is start to roll this, going from right to left. And make it look like I have a petal that is wrapped around at the top. And one thing I didn't prep out is a toothpick. Can really be your best friend when you make these roses. You can also use a wire, but we want to make it look like a very tight petal that's been wrapped around the stamen. And then all of the excess, I'm just going to kind of cup underneath and have it adhere to my stamen. And so no one really will even see this. Some people kind of look at this and they think it looks like a little gnome. You can imagine like 2 eyes and a mouth. And that's its little hat. But we want to put our wraparound petal on first. I'll do one more. So a little bit of glue. You don't really need a lot. I'm going to flip this over, place my petal on, and then begin to just roll it. And then the rest can just adhere to the bottom. And then I need this to dry for a few moments while I begin to create my next row of petals. So some chefs will go straight to a row of 3 after they've done the wraparound petal. I like to do a row of 2. So I take 2 of my smallest size. In this case, I'm using teardrops. If you notice, I've got my cutters sitting out here. I like to use teardrop cutters for all of my roses. There are other types of cutters for roses that you can use that have the same kind of a graduating size already in its set. So find what works with you or what you may have. But you want to start with your smallest cutter first and then work with your largest cutter at the end. So just like we did the wraparound petals, my first 2 petals are going to kind of hug my bud like this. They're going to go like this around my stamen. So I'm going to put the point down and hold on to this with one hand. And I'm going to start to frill my edges. And I'm wanting to keep a little bit of a thickness on the inside and really just frill the outside. I want to give my rose a little bit of structure and not have my petals completely collapse. So if I make them a little bit thicker in the center and just really focus on a thin petal on the edge, it'll hold up a little bit more. Oops. So now I'm going to go ahead and take one of my stamens that has a wraparound petal on it. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue down. I'm going to pick up my petal. I'm going to pinch it just a little bit, and then I'm going to place this a hair taller than my center. And put the rest of the gum paste down at the bottom. So I curve one side and I leave one side open. And then this petal is going to go in this way. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue here and over on this side and then overlap. Pick my petal up, pinch it just slightly. I'm going to tuck it in on one side. I'm going to hug one side and then I'm going to close this little flap and do the same thing on that side. And just put the excess down at the bottom. And you have a little bit of time. You can kind of shift your petals up if you need to. I'm going to take a toothpick and kind of frill out my petals just slightly. You could use another balling tool here. You could even kind of pinch with your hands. But then I have my center, and then I have 2 petals that have hugged that center. After this step, now I'll go with a row of 3, a row of 5, a row of 7, and so forth until I get the finished size rows that I'm looking for. So I start with a slightly bigger petal than I did for my first 2, but I do the same technique of balling it around the sides. And then I have to attach pretty much the same way. I put a little bit of glue down, and then with my row of 3, I have to put 1 petal on, And then I'm going to put a next petal and then the third petal, almost like a triangle around my flower. I'm going to pick up my petal, pinch it just a little bit. Now this petal is going to be a hair lower than what I just did for my row because it's more exposed to the sun, it's more open. So I'm going to flatten one side but leave this side open because as I attach my next petal and then my last petal, it needs to be kind of hidden by this side. So one side can be curved down and one side is still open. And we continue. We do another row. Or another petal, I should say, not a row. I hope everybody is happy and healthy and staying busy as best you can. We are doing the same thing here. And this is just one way to make roses. Take a little time, look online. There's amazing chefs online that have different techniques for roses. You'll find what works best for you. This is just one way. This is how I make my roses. So I'm gonna press the gum paste at the bottom. This side's going to be kind of folded in just like the first one. But then this outside petal, I'm just gonna fold back a little bit of my edge. Just give it a little bit of a curve, a little bit of movement. And then I've left a space for my third petal. But if you look here, it almost looks like the beginning of that triangle right there. So you can cut out more petals than what you need. I wouldn't do too many at one time, but maybe enough to do about 2 roses. And then keep them covered in plastic and they'll stay moist. You can use a page protector. You could use your piping bag that's cut open. You can use a guitar sheet if you have it. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue here and also where I'm going to close that gap. So I'm going to take my petal and I have to pinch it just like we did previously. So it's thicker in the center. So this side is going to go in here, but then it's also going to wrap around. I'm going to make sure it's about the same height as the others. I'm going to press down the back side. I'm not going to worry about that too much here. But you see I've taken this first petal, it's inside there, I close that gap, and I can curve this petal out a little bit. And I can always pull down if you need to. Let it be nice and snug. You can either use a toothpick again, kind of open up your petals a little bit. They are going to start to dry pretty soon, so you have a little bit of time to work with while they're still malleable. And then you can see here I've got what was the stamen with my wraparound petal, with my 2 petals, and then all I've done so far is 1 row of 3 petals. That's it. Oops, almost dropped it. But I want to make sure things look snug. And then again, essentially this is kind of like a tea rose. It's like what we did with marzipan or modeling chocolate. Use a little pressure to get all that excess gum paste there at the bottom. And then I can continue on with a row of 5. I can do a row of 7. You can keep going for as much as you like, as long as you give time to let these dry a little bit. If I want to try to do a row of 9 on this, it's going to be so much gum paste and it might get so wet that the petals might start falling off. So you may not be able to make a full complete rose in say like 30 minutes. You may need to pause after you do a row of 3 and then let these begin to dry and then come back and make some more petals. What you can do while you're waiting though is you can begin to make larger petals on wires if you want to have a bigger, more bountiful rose, because these also need time to dry. So these larger petals, this is my largest teardrop that I have. So this would be my absolute larger petals. This would probably be my row of say 9 or 11 that I have here. I've already begun to make my row of 7 petals that are drying. These are going to take at least a full day to dry, but I can make these and make my tea rose and let them both dry at the same time. But here I've got the same thickness of gum paste. It just happens to be a larger petal. I'm going to place that here on my foam, and I'm going to show you how to wire this. So I'm going to use, you can use a 22 gauge, a 24 gauge. I think a 18 would be a little bit too thick for these petals because you still want these to be more flexible for you when you go to attach them. But I'm going to put a little bit of glue on my wire, and then I'm going to insert here at my point side before I do any frilling, before I do any of the thinning out of my petals. And I'm feeling the wire as it's working its way up my petal. And I want to go in about 2/3. If you get a little glue on it, cornstarch will help you. You can see I've got cornstarch everywhere. But now I have a petal that's on a wire. And you do the same technique for any type of petal or any type of flower you're doing that have to be individually wired. So now that I've got a wire on here, then I can go back, I can frill my edges. You may want to take a little extra care by putting your finger near where that wire is, because you don't want to thin out the wire. You want that to be the backbone for you. Cornstarch on my finger, but I want to still frill out my edges and get them as lifelike as I can. And same thing with your balling tool, your compressed foam. You want to give these edges as much life as you can now before they go onto a flower, because once they're hard, you can't shape them. My largest petals, usually my row of 7, my row of 9, I like to curl the edges and you know, almost curl them to where it looks a little bit like a heart at the top. So I take a toothpick for this, and I will roll a little bit of my petal over a toothpick on both sides. So you can see a little bit of a curve on both sides. And then I'm going to place this over a spoon to give it kind of a cup shape. But the outer petals are the ones that are most exposed to the sun. So these ones are the largest ones, they're the most open, and their edges can be a little bit almost like torn or broken. In this case, I have a little bit of a curve. So I don't have all of my tools, but I do have my children's yogurt spoons. So they are going to make my cup shape for me. So I'm going to put a little bit of cornstarch down because I don't want my gum paste to stick to this. And then I want to give a cup shape here before I go to attach it on my flower. So I need to find something that will give it that shape. You could use, I don't know, like a plastic egg if you happen to have any left over. Maybe you got some in advance for Easter. But something that will give it this kind of a curved cup shape. And then when I go to attach this to my prepared rose with maybe a row of 5 petals on it, it'll look more natural because it's not just flush onto my rose. It has a curve and a cup shape. So you want to make these and let those dry. And then that way you're kind of multitasking. So I can have petals being dried. I can have petals that I can attach to my stamen already pre-made. And then I can take these once these are dry, and then I wrap them with floral tape and I make a bigger, beautiful rose. And then once it's wrapped, then I can go back and add a calyx on the bottom. I can do a little bit of green luster dust on the bottom. I can add a little luster here. And then the final finishing touch, once I've wrapped my flowers, I steam them and I make them look a little bit more kind of wet and glistening with dew just by using a steamer. And we'll do that in another video as well. You can do a pot of water and wave this over a little steam, or you can use an actual like steamer that you would use for your clothes. And it really makes it look the most realistic as possible. So 2 tiny little quick last things. The calyx, when you are ready to do a calyx, you just need to have some green gum paste when you go to make your calyx. I'm just going to show you real quick, but the same technique applies. You're going to cut out your green. I'm going to put this onto my foam. I'm still going to frill out my edges and make them look a little thinner. Not worrying so much about the center, but really thin on the edges. And then I would, when I'm completely done, put a little bit of glue on the bottom of my flower and then literally pierce a hole through here and just string it up, and then it will attach with the glue. Now obviously this one's not done. I'm going to continue to add some more petals to it, but gravity will kind of be your friend here. Put a little glue on, and then you have that green calyx on the bottom to make it look, again, more lifelike. Again, that would be more of your last step. The only other little kind of tip I want to mention to you right now applies to all petals. But if I want to take a petal and I want it to have the most realistic look to it, and not to say all roses have this look, but other petals will have this. If I want to do a peony, or if I want to do different types of dahlias, I can take a leaf press and I can press it on top of my petal. And I do this on my foam because I am going to rock it back and forth. But then it will give me that indent of the leaf press. And you don't always have to use expensive silicone leaf presses. A corn husk works great to make these kind of imprints. If you make tamales, you could use that and just kind of press it on them. You can even take a little bit of saran wrap and ball it up and press it on top of the gum paste. It'll really take whatever shape that you want it to take. And this just happens to be a silicone mat. And then this is another one. Hopefully you can see the imprint on the white. So I'm going to make some peony petals tonight also, so I can show you how to assemble up a full peony. But I use the same leaf imprint on here, and then I just dried this petal in one of these very expensive 99-cent painter's palette in order to get that cup shape. So this will work great for a peony. It'll work great for an anemone type petal. But again, I have to make all my petals before they can dry. So I'm going to let that one sit. So I hope everybody is keeping busy during quarantine, but keeping up your skills as well. Reach out if you have any questions. Once I can go ahead and make all of my petals of the rose, I will do a follow-up, and it will just be how to wire them, wrap them with floral wire, and then floral tape, I should say, and then a little dusting with the steaming. But then we'll do another video for just, say, an anemone, and one just for a peony, and so forth and so forth. But I hope everybody stays safe and be as well.